So, welcome to Infinite Wisdom. We are very excited to be here tonight with a world traveler. And he doesn't know it, but I'm a world traveler too. So, we're going to
Oh, I have
have
a lot
some,
to talk about.
we got a lot to talk about. And some of the people on the audience have traveled with me to these places. So, it's going to be really fun and really relevant for everybody. So, John Strelecky, I want to introduce you just very simply because I've already written about you, they've read about you, and I like to have the details come out in the interview rather than do a big preamble. But they know, as your book is there in your backdrop, that you wrote The Cafe on the Edge of the World, among other things. And so we're going to dive in and go in the Wayback Machine way before the cafe came bursting forth out of you. Um, I'd love to find out a little bit more about, where you were when you were a kid and what you were wondering about and who were your heroes?
Hmm. Let's see. So who was I as a kid? I was an outdoorsy kid. I loved to go on adventures. I loved to explore new places, whether that was like the neighborhood or it was kind of a different time in life back then. I think about that as it relates to my own daughter. And so when I was a kid, you could just literally get on your bike and just go. And the expectation was you'd be back at a certain time, but nobody knew where you were. Nobody knew where you went. And you had to be like you had to know where you were in town. You had to be good with directions. You had to figure stuff out. And yeah, it was awesome. I mean, one of the places that I would have baseball practice was literally across a 4-lane highway. And you'd have to just manage that as a little kid. And you did. And so, it was great. It taught you self-reliance. It taught you self-confidence for those kind of things. As I got older
So
and
before we go on, so what time frame are we talking? 60s,
uh,
70s,
that was in the early 70s, early to mid 70s. Yep.
early mid 70s? Yeah, before all the other things happened. And you were in a suburban area or
Yeah, we lived in the suburbs of Chicago, Illinois, and so it was very nice. We had a giant field across the house. We'd play football and baseball and all kinds of stuff, and ride our bikes around. And yeah, it was in retrospect, it was very chill and very you could just go do your thing, which was awesome as a kid. It wasn't like tons of forests or anything like that.
right?
So it was still neighborhoody, but yeah, no, it was a lot of freedom.
And when you think about the things that piqued your interest in school, were there particular subjects that kind of caught your eye?
Recess, I loved recess. Oh, that was the best. And then when you finally got old enough that you'd have gym and recess in a single day, like that was money.
Spoken like a real boy.
Yeah. I was good at school, but I didn't really love school. And so I just kind of made my way through it. The expectations were do your best and I was, able to do well. But I even at a young age, I just kind of was confused about what the point of life was, to be honest with you. I looked at people that were managing the human experience and it seemed confusing to me because most of them didn't seem to like the job they did. And so the path seemed to be you go to school for a really long time. And like I said, I didn't really love school. And so then you're going to end up going to college. I didn't really know what that meant when I was a kid, but then you're going to graduate college and then you get a job. And it seemed like most of the adults didn't like their job. And then you did that until you were 65. And then finally at 65, you got freedom back. And that was kind of my perception of the world. And it just seemed very confusing as a kid. Like, wait, this is the best we have to offer.
So were you one of a passel of kids or were you
I was one of three. So I have an older sister and a younger sister. Yeah, real close in age. Though. I think there's only like a 4.5 year gap between us.
uh-huh. And what was your father somebody who commuted or was he close by?
He was pretty close by. Yeah. So he had a flexibility. He was an entrepreneur, and so he had flexibility in his job, and that was awesome. So when it came to baseball games, he was always there, and yeah, he made a real effort to make sure that anything involving his kids, he was front and center. And same with my mom.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. So you're kind of confused about this whole setup
Yeah,
of life. At a young age, it's interesting to me that you're thinking that way
I know
because most of us don't.
it's kind of weird in that I remember having a defining moment one time, and I don't remember how old I was. It was probably in my 20s or 30s when I realized that everybody doesn't think the same way that I do. Like, I just assumed every human had the same type of brain, this type of thoughts they were thinking were about the same. And, I've come to realize that's totally not true. Some people are extraordinary at looking at schematics or doing physics or chemistry. That wasn't me. I could, make my way through it if I absolutely had to. Where I was extraordinary was on the creative side. I could invent worlds in my head. I could think of weird and unusual thoughts about the point of the universe and why we are here as human beings. And it took me a long time to realize that I wasn't like most people were not thinking about that stuff. They were thinking about different stuff.
Right. Interesting, especially at that young age. Did you get
Yeah.
into science fiction at all?
I did enjoy science fiction. I loved reading. That was one of the great things that my mom actually did. So when summer break would arrive, she would take us to the library and we would go home, each of my sisters and I would a literal stack, like as many as you could carry was kind of the rule. And so we'd get home with 10, 12 books and I would spend hours and hours reading and reading. And so I think you could rent them or you could borrow them from the library for like 2 weeks. Within 7 days, I was done and ready to go back to the library again. So yeah, I flew through books when I was a kid and I loved everything that was adventure based, whether it was the Old West, whether it was the Tarzan series, whether it was science fiction, anything that had to do with adventure, I was in.
That's what I was trying to get after.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. That seed was already there within you.
Yeah, which I think is interesting. I mean, I'd love to hear your perspective on this. I'm quite convinced that you arrive in the human form with a bit of coding already. Like, I don't think it's fully formative based on your life experiences, your parents, where you grew up, the rest of that. It seems like that you arrive with some of these things hardwired in you. And so then it's a question of, can you figure out what those things are? Because that's really the sweet spot of where you'll play well if you can
Yeah.
figure it out. So
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think for your own life?
Oh, definitely. And this is one of the reasons why I like to go back into the
Mm,
childhood because it's unvarnished, and we have these little inclinations, that later on we look back and go, well, of course, but so I like to try to find those seeds, and there it was. That's what I was hoping I would find when you
yeah.
poked around enough. So you go to college, you study what?
I had no idea what I wanted to study. And when I was a senior in high school, I saw the movie Top Gun and made the horrendous career decision that I would go be a pilot because of Top Gun. And so for everybody who's watching who has a high school kid, just let them know that movies are not the best source of career guidance. But what I liked about it and what I was drawn to was the adventure. I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to push the envelope of what I was capable of. And it was weird because I actually was not a tremendously confident kid. Like I was confident when I was very young and I was adventurous, and then I lost that, and it took me a long time to get it back. But there was something about this idea of pushing the envelope, like the movie showed, that drew me. And the other thing that drew me was I didn't know much about different careers, but what I knew about pilots was that they got to go travel the world, and I knew they made pretty good money, and I knew they had a lot of time off. And so those three things seemed like a pretty good combination to me. Again, these days it's so easy to learn about careers, but back then it wasn't so easy. And
No.
so with that as my basis, I was like, yeah, that's what I'll go do.
And so you applied, you went to Embry-Riddle, right? Is that
I
right?
did, yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Crazy. It's interesting how the world of coincidence, I call it the cosmic algorithm of the universe, starts to give you opportunities based on what you show as your interest. And so literally when I was like, I have no idea what I want to do, but then I saw the movie, I was like, that sounds amazing. And literally a week later, a representative from the school Embry-Riddle, which is one of the top aviation universities in the United States, and there's only like 5 or 6 of them, happened to be coming to my little high school outside of the Chicago suburbs. Now, this school is in Daytona Beach, Florida. Like, what are the odds that that person from that college is coming to my school? And a week after I'd seen the movie, and so that was enough of a catalyst to make me realize, oh, there's actually a place where people learn to do this, and that was it. I signed on.
Beautiful. And you went all the way through the program
Yeah, I did.
and then hit a speed bump.
Yeah. I would say it was beyond a speed bump. I would say it was like a major pothole. So yeah, I had been working since I was 12 years old. I invested every penny I'd ever made to pay for college because my parents couldn't afford to send me. And when I graduated, I came out of the experience with one of the only recommendation letters in the history of one of the major airlines here in the United States. I'd done a free internship one summer. And so I was poised to be one of the youngest captains in the history of this particular airline. It's a very famous
Wow.
airline.
Wow.
only to then find out that as I went through the process of applying and getting hired, that I had a very rare heart condition that nobody had ever diagnosed before, which only matters if you want to be a pilot or an astronaut. So like, what are the odds? But of course, that was the dream that I had, was to be a pilot. And so literally I went from being on top of the world one day to being absolutely crushed under a truck of reality the next day, and no real plan for how to figure out what the heck I was going to do next.
How did you how long did you stay in that pothole?
Yeah, I was there for at least a year, I would say. I was really depressed, and I'd worked so hard to get there. Like I said, I had invested every penny I'd ever earned since I was 12. And I would be working 2, 3 jobs every summer. I'd get up, I'd start at 6, I wouldn't get home till 10, 11 at night. And to have invested all of that in a dream and then have the dream taken away because of something that you had no control over, I think that was the part that was most brutal. It had
Oh,
been
yeah.
one thing if I'd have done something stupid, or made a classic mistake of some sort of, but it wasn't that. I literally just had it taken away. And so I think that's part of what made the pain so severe.
I'm sure that would be crushing, especially at that age when you're about to launch, literally fly,
Yeah.
and then you're grounded.
And it was
Wow.
weird. It's like, I remember one of the worst movies. It's like you think of the movie, the way movies are made, and you have the hero's journey, and you have I'm trying to think of what the phrase is. It's the dark night of the soul. It's the
Right.
moment that's like the worst of the worst for the character. And I remember when I was in high school, one of the jobs that I had was I would work cash register at a department store. And so I graduated quite high in my school, and everybody knows I'm going to go off to this aviation university, and I'm going to try and be the next Top Gun, and I'm going to be an airline pilot. Well, when the dream was yanked away from me and I had to like get myself back on my feet, I went back to that department store and was like, I need a job. Like, can I get my job? And sure enough, I'm doing that job. I hate the job. I'm feeling so low about life. And one of my former teachers comes in, and he looks at me and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm just like, "What am I doing here? I don't know what I'm doing here." Yeah, it was a very defining, pathetic moment for me. Not that there's anything wrong with working at a department store, but just kind of the way it all transpired, it was just like, "Oh, this is not where I want to be."
A real reimagining of oneself, your identity, everything went
Yes.
out the
Yeah,
window.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
to not have been a confident kid and then become
Yeah.
confident in this world of flying and
Yeah.
then have to go back. Oh,
I
that's
say that that's the
crushing.
ones that are the most painful, that when we allow ourselves to dream and to hope and then something bad happens associated with it, like those are the ones that really test your character. And I would say that was definitely the case with me.
This is why it's worth talking about, because we've all had our version of that.
Yeah.
And how do we get back up? What happens, and I don't know if you would say this. I'm actually curious because so many times it's those dark nights of the soul, those things that stop us in our tracks, that creates the fodder for the next iteration. And looking back on it, you'd say, thank God that happened to me. I
Right.
wouldn't want to repeat it,
Right.
but it changed everything. So do you have that perspective now?
Oh, 100%. My life now and for the last 20 years has been so much better than it would have been as a pilot, from two perspectives. One is I enjoyed flying, but I didn't love flying. Like there were certain people in my classes that were like human birds, like they lived and breathed it. They knew everything you could possibly know about it. For me, it was just a path to something else. It was a path to freedom, basically. And so better that I was the one who got, had that situation yanked out from underneath me than one of them, because literally that would have been extremely catastrophic. That was their life. That was their
Mm.
identity. That was who they were. So from that perspective, I can look back in the rearview mirror and say, hey, better me than them. And then from the other perspective is I only realized later as things evolved and I ended up going on great adventures. And then the book, The Café on the Edge of the World, flowed through me and all the great stuff that's happened since then, that there was a very different path that was waiting for me to walk it. And honestly, it took a giant 2x4 across the forehead before I would listen to that and
Uh-huh.
honor that. And it just maybe had to happen that way.
So how did you scrape yourself back up off the floor?
One pathetic day at a time is all I can tell you. It was, like I said, I was horribly depressed for a year and trying to figure it out. And then at some point you just start to realize if I just stay like this is where the story is going to end. And that would be pretty pathetic. That's not where I want this to go. And I was still relatively young. And so I just started to try and pick up the pieces. I thought, what do I want to do? And why did I want to do those things? And so, yeah, I just started to try and pick up the pieces again and move my life in a bit of a better direction.
And
And I
you
actually got
you you went traveling, didn't you?
well, eventually I did, but I actually got a great gift from the universe before that. And this is what I mean by the cosmic algorithm of the universe. I think that sometimes things will get taken away from you that you feel are very catastrophic. And then sometimes you're going to get gifts, and the
Mhm.
gifts are completely unexpected. Now, I had worked super hard in school, and so I had demonstrated that I had the ability to succeed in an academic arena. But when I was maybe 2 years after, 3 years after the knowledge that I could no longer fly anymore, one of my friends, a friend of my parents said, what are you going to do? I said, I have no idea. And he said, well, maybe you should think about going back to school, like get your MBA. And honestly, I was like, oh, like school. I thought I was done with that.
Yeah.
But he said, well, you should really think about it. That can open up some doors for you. And at the time I was working in a very horrible job for a very horrible boss and hating every second of it. But I was working at a university, and I thought, well, maybe I can go to night school. Maybe I can do that. And so I took the GMAT and I applied to this particular university, and I promptly I waited and then did the application, and then I got a letter in the mail saying you're not accepted. I just felt like, are you kidding me? Like, how many more times can I get kicked on this little adventure? But it did say on the bottom of the letter that if you feel you have been rejected in error, you can send a letter back and we'll reconsider you. And so I sent this letter back, and I laughingly tell this story because it's like, that was basically an FU letter. Like, I was just so mad about life and everything that had happened to me. And so they said, why do you think that we erred basically in rejecting you? And I wrote this letter that said, you have no idea what it's like to be flying a plane when there's ice on the wings and you have passengers' lives at stake. You have no idea what it's like to do this. You have no idea what it's like to do this. And I was laying out all the reasons why all the stuff that I had done in my life merited getting a shot. Because one of the reasons they said they didn't think I was worth having in it, they didn't think I'd have enough practical work experience. So I was like, oh, really? Have you ever flown a plane with passengers? So I just laid it all out. And I fully, absolutely zero expected anyone to ever respond to that. It was just cathartic on some level to like vent. And so sure enough, I send this letter, I vent, I send it off. I don't expect to hear anything back. I'm trying to get my life back in order. And 6 months later, I got a letter in the mail that said, congratulations, you're in for the fall. And it was an evening program, which was the only way that I could afford to go. And so I showed up at the very first class and didn't know anything about what I was getting myself into other than further education. And everyone in my class is all abuzz. Like, we're number one, we're number one. And it turned out that we were the number one MBA business program in the entire country. It's Northwestern University's Kellogg School.
Oh,
I had only applied to one school because I happened to be working there. I didn't know anything about ranking systems. So this was an example where the universe clearly handed one back to me in a big, bold way, because that degree opened up doors that never would have been open to me otherwise.
wow. And when were you there?
Oh, when was I there? I was there 97 to about, 97 to 98, I guess.
I was there
Or 95 to
80
97.
I was there 80 to 81.
Really? At
Yeah.
Northwestern?
Yes, but not in this business program. Anyway,
Nice.
so you go through this business program.
Yeah.
And at what point do you decide you want to start wandering?
Yeah. So I had another profound experience. I'd been doing consulting for a while. I was very good at it. I was very well paid for that. It just wasn't a job that I felt a deep heart connection to. I don't know if you can ever relate to that, if you've done stuff that
Oh
you're
God,
good
yes.
at and people appreciated, but you didn't feel it, And so you're looking at life, it's passing you by, and you're wondering, what happens if I keep doing this? And two things happened. One is that was going on, and I was looking at the people that were 10 years older than me and thinking, all right, so if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to be them in 10 years. And nothing wrong with them or their lives. It just wasn't the life that I had dreamed of living. And the second thing is that my grandfather passed away, and he was in his 80s when he passed away. I didn't really know him that well. He lived quite far away, but there was something about that night when my mom called and told me that kind of rocked my world. It just made me think, I wonder how he felt at the very end. Did he feel like I lived the life I was supposed to live? Was he regretful? And I just kept thinking, if I keep doing what I'm doing, if I'm lucky enough to make it to 80, I'm going to be regretful, you know? And so I decided to do the big, bold move. And I left everything behind in my early 30s and went to backpack around the world, which was really the original dream for why I wanted to be a pilot in the first place.
Oh, wow. Long way around.
I know, right? Yeah, 10 years late, but better late than never.
And so you backpacked around the world, and did you have kind of like a wish list of all of the places you wanted to visit? And did you plan it out, or was it something that you started and then you just let yourself be led, or a combination?
Combination of the two. I knew that I wanted to get to Africa. I dreamed about seeing Africa since I was a little kid. And so that was definitely on the list. And for the rest of it, everything was an adventure. You know, it almost didn't matter. It was the fact, and I'm still like this today. It doesn't really matter if there's something big. I just want to see it for the sake of seeing it, to know that I was there, that I saw that part of the planet. But that said, if you've never been to Southeast Asia, the very first time you walk around Thailand and you're walking around all of these incredible temples, and one of every 4 people is a Buddhist monk, and like everything is so different, and it's just kind of rocks your world in a beautiful way to realize that your little reality was just a sliver of what is going on out there in the world. And that if you allow yourself to go experience more of it, then you start to feel less constrained by the size of your box, because you realize like, no, there's actually a whole lot of other possibilities out there.
Yes, yes. And were you intrigued by sort of anything in particular, more geographical sites or religious sites or ancient sites? Was there anything in particular, or all of the above?
I'd say all the above. So different cultures fascinate me. And again, it can be something little. Like if you've ever gone to a night market in like China, it is such a radically different experience than you'll ever have anywhere here in the US. And so to experience that and see like meat hanging from hooks outside, and somebody comes up and they're like, oh, I'll take 2 of that. And literally they're cutting off a slab of meat that's not refrigerated. It's not frozen. They wrap it in a piece of newspaper and hand it to the person, and they go home and eat that. And you're like, okay, like that is just so different. It makes you kind of aware that your way of doing things isn't the only way. It makes you sometimes very appreciative of things that you just have your whole life you've taken for granted. I'll tell you one that's so simple but so basic. Here in the US, when you go to a restaurant and you sit down, they bring you a giant glass of water, and they will refill it for you as many times as you want. Like it's just free water. The US is one of the only places in the world where you will experience that. And that was so confusing to me when I was like, wait, what? You have to like buy water and then they give you this tiny little bottle. So even something as small as that makes you really appreciate anytime you go sit down somewhere in the US and you get the giant glass of water that they'll refill to infinity.
I agree with you. I know what you mean. So you went to Africa. Where else did you go on this first year-long trip?
Yeah, so all across Southeast Asia, all across China, parts of Europe, and Africa was the big one. I learned early on that it's less about visiting as many countries as possible in the time that you're traveling, and it's better to have a deeper immersive experience in the country. So 1 week in a country only gives you a glimpse at it. But like in South Africa, I spent 3 months there, and in 3 months, you really, really get to know the people and the culture and the nuances that make a country and a culture unique and special.
South Africa is quite a place.
It is, yeah. If anybody who's watching that has any desire at all to go to Africa, I strongly suggest that you go. I've never met a person who didn't come back from Africa and say the words, "It changed my life." And so it's just something so cellular about being there. I think it's kind of the cradle of civilization, and because of that, we feel a kinship to it when we go there.
I have a friend who was as a young man was setting off to go, I think, to India.
Okay.
But their plane landed somewhere in northern Africa, or for some reason they had to land, and they were to get off the plane. Of course, it's on the tarmac. It's not, you walk down the stairs, whatever. He said as soon as his feet hit the ground, he had a bolt of lightning. He said it felt like I was home.
Yeah.
And he said he didn't get back on the plane, and he just stayed in Africa, wandering around for months.
I love that. Yeah, and it's really intriguing to me, like, why that is. There's certain places that I've traveled to where I feel exactly like that. Central America is very much like that for me. No matter where I go there, it feels very much like home. Other places I go don't feel like home, and I think, oh, well, maybe in a past life I lived here, or maybe there's just something energetically about this place that crosses with my own energy that makes it feel comfortable. And so, yeah, I think that's one of the great things about getting out there and traveling is you do find these other places and you realize you could live a lot of different places. Just, one of my favorite expressions is just because you're born in a particular place doesn't mean you have to stay there, you know?
Right?
And that's not really
Absolutely.
taught, I don't find in everyday life.
No, it was much more common in when I was growing up to get out
Mm,
there in the world, Um, Now, were you traveling by yourself the whole time?
a mix. Yeah. So I enjoy traveling by myself and I also enjoy traveling with others. And so I will say that for anybody who's never traveled by themselves, it does wonders for your self confidence because
Mhm.
you have to figure things out on your own. And by default, you will. And each time you do that, it just makes you a little more self confident in what you're capable of. And that's a beautiful thing. Also, because when you're traveling with others, the way in which you meet fellow travelers is different. And so when you're traveling solo, you're more likely to strike up random conversations with people who are also traveling solo or even traveling in groups.
Mhm.
And that doesn't necessarily always happen when you're traveling with your own group.
Mhm. So were you drawn to anything in particular? I should tell you a little bit about my travel is always to ancient sites. And
Mm,
I'm a dowser, so I douse for where to go every year and bring a group. And we've been doing this for, I've lost count, 10, 12, 15 years, something like that.
okay.
And they've taken us to South Africa. Took us to the Timbavati, to the far east, the northeast. And we've been various other places, but it's usually because there are antiquities.
Mm,
And the quality of the land where the antiquities are different. And you probably know this. And so I was just wondering if that was something that occurred to you on this first trip, because I'm sure you've had many, many since. But as you were just sort of branching out, did any of that kind of land
yeah.
energy attract you?
There's a beautiful place called Bagan in Myanmar. And that's very high on my list of recommendations for people to go. The US government recommends you don't go to Myanmar. And so make your own decision accordingly. When I was there, it was just an absolutely beautiful, remote place. There were very, very few tourists. And so you really got to immerse yourself in the culture. And I think it's 11,000 temples across this desert area. And you rent a bicycle back then, you rented a bicycle for like $1 for the entire day. And you could bike from temple to temple, just exploring these abandoned remote temples. Or no, sorry, it was 4,000 temples, but from the 1100s. That was the math on it. And so these temples are almost 1,000 years old and they're everywhere. And you could climb to the top of them and look out on the horizon and it's just temple, temple, temple. And you're thinking to yourself, my goodness, what this civilization must have been like back in the day. It's
Mhm.
just, and the fact that the buildings are still there 900 to 1,000 years later is absolutely astounding. And so, yeah, no matter where I went, I was just astounded by that. I remember being in Italy for the very first time and I was walking down a street in Rome and they were doing some construction on the road. And I kind of looked down at the work that they were doing under the ground, and there's like a marble road underneath there, which is an ancient Roman road, and nobody cares. They're just like, yeah, whatever, just another Roman road. I'm like, what the? Coming from the States, that was just mind blowing to me like that. I'm looking at a Roman road right there, made of marble. Just so,
Yeah.
yeah, I love that aspect of travel.
It's beautiful.
What's your favorite one or two spots that you've gone to in terms of ancient civilizations?
Oh my gosh, it's really hard. I've been asked that question before. I mean, I really can't say because I love Machu Picchu.
Mm,
I love Easter Island. I love Scotland. I mean, I love them all. I love all
yeah.
my children the best at that. But let's talk about when you were feeling it was time to come home and how this book spilled out of you.
Yeah, so the wonderful thing about traveling, and again, I had never done something like this on this scale before, was that you very much learn to trust your intuition and your
Yeah.
instincts because in many cases you don't know the culture, you don't know the language, you don't know the nuances, and so all you have to really rely on is your instincts and your intuition. And so my channel, and I guess what I've learned over the years is that the more you rely on it, the more that muscle grows, the wider that channel becomes, and you start to feel things intuitively that you couldn't feel before. You get a good sense of things. You trust your inner guidance. And so when I came back from the experience, something inside of me said, sit down and start typing on a particular day. And I didn't question it. I didn't debate it. I just was like, okay. And so I sat down and started typing, and it went on for 21 days. It was a very stream of conscious typing experience. And over the 21 days, the story of the cafe on the edge of the world flowed through me. And I didn't think about what I was going to type the next day. I didn't pre-read what I had typed any of the previous days. I just typed. And at the end of the 21 days, I put it on a shelf, let it sit there for about a week. And when I came back and read it for the very first time, it is almost word for word what's in the book that you see on the screen. And so that's what I mean by sometimes in life, you get handed things that you maybe didn't even deserve. And so I think the story of the cafe was actually out there in the ether, and it was looking for an author. And when I demonstrated to the algorithm that I was willing to be courageous and willing to follow my heart, that maybe the algorithm said, that's interesting, because we have a story here that we're looking for someone to, you're going to need to be a little courageous with this. You're going to need to be a little trusting. You're going to need to sort of cross some chasms at times with this one. And so by demonstrating through my travels that I was willing to do that, I became a candidate. And then when the intuition said, sit down and start typing, and I did, then I became a further candidate. Now, the story could have ended there. Like, I might have had the experience of typing it and then left it on the shelf and never did anything with that. And maybe then a year later, somebody else would have had the story flow through them and they would have did it. But because I had this business background, I was able to say, okay, well, what should I do with this? It looks like a book. It feels like a book. I should turn it into a book, you know? And so then all of that entrepreneurial training I'd had since I was 12 years old kicked in. And so again, like you were asking, when you look in the rearview mirror, I realized, yeah, there was a lot of stuff that had to happen, a lot of dots that needed to be connected to enable me to be the conduit to bring this story to life. And without all of those, I couldn't have done it.
Very interesting. Very, yeah. First of all, I really agree with you in terms of the things that are sort of hanging, the fruit that is hanging there, waiting for the right person with the right set of circumstances and the willingness to say yes.
Yeah.
I think that's part of why this little thing called the infinitywave came to me. I certainly wasn't looking for it, but I had a certain criteria that I was available, and they figured I would say yes, and I did. But this is a beautiful example of willingness and openness and non-judgment. Because most people, when they're writing something, they kind of have a critical eye out. And you just didn't. You had no judgment about it. Now, did you, when you read it a week later, did you see yourself in the book?
Without a doubt. People have asked me, who do you write for? And I let the stories flow through me to the best of my ability. And that said, without a doubt, the very first person who's supposed to read them is me. There's something in every book that has been written by me, flowed through me, that has been transformative in my life in some capacity. And so, yeah, I greatly benefit from it. Sometimes I can only find answers to the questions that I'm struggling with in the cafe.
Wow.
It's really interesting. So to me, it's as very much a place that I go to as it would be going to a local coffee shop. And I think the other thing is that when you're on these kind of adventures, that you're going to get nudges that tell you that you're heading in the right direction. And yes. I got one early on with this. Again, it looked like a book. It felt like a book. I thought, I'll turn it into a book. And then the entrepreneur side of me was like, well, what happens after I do that? Like, how do you create awareness even about a book? And I thought, I know, like, I'll contact a magazine and let them know that I'm the author of this book, and maybe they'll do a book review or something. I was clueless, absolutely clueless. But sometimes that's a good thing, because when you're clueless, you're willing to try things that if you knew more, you wouldn't even do.
Right.
And so I cold called this magazine, and I got through to the editor. I think that was a mistake on the part of the admin. And I explained my story, and she was like, you could just tell she was kind of like, who is this guy? Like, why are you calling me? And she said, well, finally, I think I just wore her down. And she said, okay, well, fine, send me the book and I'll take a look at it. Because she was like, we don't really do that kind of stuff. Like, we don't do book reviews. But she said, send me the book and I'll take a look at it. And I was such a complete amateur that I didn't have a book. I just had a manuscript. And so I said, I don't have a book. I have a manuscript. Can I send you that? And now looking back, like no editor would ever in their entire life say yes, because who knows if it's ever going to be turned into a book, or is it going to take a year or whatever. But she said yes. And so I used up my $25 ink cartridge. I print this out and I sent it. And then I called her back a week later, and literally she had no idea who I was when I called her back.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was okay. I got a lot to figure out here. I got a lot to learn, and I need to make some money because I just paid for my $25 ink cartridge with that one printout. And so I was kind of like sitting back, wondering what I'm supposed to do. And then 3 days later, I get a phone call. And this is back in the day when you would actually pick up random phone calls on your phone. And I picked it up, and it turned out it was the editor. And she said, we need to meet. And I was like, oh, that sounds way more positive, right? And so we set up a time. I go to this restaurant. I don't know her at all. I've never met her. I just had called her. And so I said, I'm supposed to meet this person. She's like, oh, I have table 7 over there. I go over there, I sit down, and I'm not kidding, Hope. Her opening words to me were, your little book has changed my life. And I just remember getting goosebumps up and down my spine. And I was like, wow, like, okay. And that was my very first reader ever to tell me that. And so that's what I mean. You get these little nudges from the universe that say, don't give up now. Like, we're just at the start of something that's going to be really great.
Right.
And the amazing stories I could tell you over the years that have come from the little book that you're looking at, and it would have never maybe happened had I have not listened to that crazy voice inside my head that said, sit down and type, or the crazy voice that said, cold call this editor,
But
or
what's
go to lunch with this
amazing-
person that you don't know, even though you're not really
Yeah.
super
I mean, the being in a don't know mind and doing it anyway is, but it's so great. It's so great. I love the courage, and I love the drive, because there's something pulling you forward with this. And when you finally got this book to be recognized, it caught on like wildfire.
Yeah.
And you sold it around the world in like a year. It was in 20 languages or something crazy.
Yeah. So the very first year I was selling it myself through a website that I designed that was absolutely horrible, just so horrible. Like literally, if you looked at it on your computer screen, some days all the text would be on the left side of the screen. Other days it would be all on the bottom. Like it was just, this was back before there was these great tools that you have today. And I didn't know how to do a website. So I was just making it up as I went. Despite that, like we had sales coming in, I think from 24 different countries in the first year. Like I had no idea how people were hearing about this book. And then, you fast forward to today, and today it was 9-time bestseller of the year. It sold 6 million copies. Like and those are all nice things. Like it's in 45 languages. Those are all beautiful things and wonderful things. And I'm humbled every single day by that. But far more important are the moments that you get to experience with the readers, the real, just life-changing moments. I've received letters from people that tell me, I remember one that I'll use my own intuition because the story just came to me as we were having this conversation. And it was this beautiful letter. It's a very emotional letter. And in this letter, this lady shared that he was reading the book to her daughter and how much the book meant to both her and her daughter. And I just remember reading the start of the letter and thinking that's kind of odd. Like, why would you be reading a book to your daughter? It's not really a book for little kids. And the letter goes on, and in the letter, she talked about how her daughter was terminal with cancer, and she was in the hospital, and she was in her early 20s, and that the book and the story and everything in it, and the characters and the way they talked, like had given her daughter so much hope. And the letter ends that she died. His kid died, But the fact that the Café could give hope to her in the last months, weeks of her life, and give hope to her mom in the last weeks, months of watching her child pass away. Now, as a parent, I can't even imagine what that is going to be like. And so that's what keeps me going. Like, that's what keeps me moving. That somehow this story decided that I would get to be a part of that. And every day, you're going to face some obstacles in life for sure. You're going to face toxic people for sure. But it's moments like that that inspire you to strap on the body armor and go to fight for these situations, for these people who are feeling lost, who are feeling sad, who are feeling hopeless, because you know that there's something in that story that flowed through you that can help them.
Mhm.
And that's why I do it.
Oh, beautiful, John. Beautiful. And
Humbling, like it's every day
yeah,
every day in this life is humbling in that regard. Like I don't know how I got to be so lucky as to be a part of that. If one person in my life, when I was 18, if they had said to me, one person at one time in your life will say, thank you, you in some way changed my life, I would have taken that deal in a heartbeat, like in a heartbeat. Right. And we get these incredible, beautiful messages like all the time, you know?
amazing.
Yeah.
What a gift. Let's talk
It
about
is.
3 questions.
Yeah. So the essence of the story is about a guy who's struggling to figure out the point of life, and he's struggling with his own existence. And he finds this tiny little cafe in the middle of nowhere. And he goes inside of there and he flips over the menu. And on the back of the menu, there's 3 questions. Why are you here? Do you fear death? And are you fulfilled? And initially he's kind of like, where am I? Like, what the heck am I looking at? But he starts talking to people in the cafe, and they start talking to him and asking him questions, and he learns about their stories. They learn about his story. And by the time he stays all night, and by the time the night is over, he has a completely new perspective about his life in particular and about life overall. And that's really the essence of the story. It all takes place in one night in this little cafe.
Wow. Only one night. And come away with a whole different perspective on life. That's pretty great.
And it actually is tied to travel in that regard. Like I would imagine if you and I had 3 hours, or you, me, and everybody else on the call had 3 or 4 hours, and you started to reflect on random experiences you've had when you're traveling with another fellow traveler who you don't know. You're sitting at a cafe, you're sitting at a bar, you're sitting at a hostel somewhere, and you just get into a random conversation, and that person in some way leaves you with a gem of an idea or a gem of a piece of wisdom that you carry with you literally for the rest of your life. And it all happened in one night.
Beautiful. So the book comes out and the book is a massive hit, and then you become a massive hit.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of weird in the author world in that when you have a book that does well, the next thing that happens is you start to get asked to do speaking engagements. And this is hilarious to me because the skill sets that are required for being a good writer are radically different from the skill sets that are required to being a professional speaker. One you do in almost complete isolation. And like for me, I need complete quiet, or if I'm going to have any sound whatsoever, it needs to be nature. Like I need to be at a park. I often write it outside at a park. A speaking event is you standing on a stage with 500, 5,000, 18,000 people, and you're talking to them and you're talking out loud. And it's just like, oh,
Helps when you do it that way.
so completely different, and yet you're right. That's kind of the evolution that happens, is that people who connect with the kind of things that you write about ideally are interested into getting to know you better. And now there's other ways to do that now compared to when I first started. Now there's social media. You can take whatever are your thoughts and ideas and post them without actually having to be on a stage. But even that, the more popular you become on social media, at some point, someone's going to reach out and be like, hey, we got this big event. How'd you like to be speaking at it?
Did you enjoy that, or do you enjoy that?
I think that's one of the things about when you're interacting with something that you feel deeply connected to, that you be aware of how you're playing with the cosmic algorithm of the universe. Because in my experience, the algorithm is watching what you do, and it's rewarding you with more of what you're demonstrating that you're interested in doing. And as an author, you can quickly move away from being an author and become a speaker. And not only are they, as I said, 2 very different skill sets, but they're very different things in terms of how rewarding they feel in terms of your process for that. And so for me, I realized early on that as much as I was grateful and humbled by these opportunities to go speak, I much preferred writing to speaking. And so when my daughter was little, I did very, very few of them. And these days I'll do 2 or 3 a year, and that's it. And it's not that I don't enjoy it. It's not that I don't love the fans and interacting. I just know that compared to the other things, it's not quite as enthralling for me.
So Um, when you went on after this book went crazy and you got up in front of the world, um, did you go back to adventuring? Did you write the second book right away? How did that happen?
Yeah, no, when my daughter was 4.5, between 4.5 and 5, we made the decision that we wanted her to know the world as well. And she had already traveled a lot before that, but nothing of huge duration. And so we took a year and backpacked around the world with her, sleeping in tents in Africa,
Wow.
holding koala bears in Australia. The whole thing was
Wow.
built around animals because she loved animals, still does. And so, yeah, I mean, we were in the jungles of Malaysia looking at watching orangutans. We're in Africa, and I have so many great pictures and memories of her just experiencing life at that young age and
Wow.
absorbing all of this. And it's interesting because there's always a yin and yang to everything. And I think one of the challenges for her as a human being has been she tasted freedom at such a young age and knew what the joy of exploring in alignment with your heart felt like. That as she's progressed through school, it's gotten harder and harder for her to be enthusiastic.
Yeah.
Like she's so anxious and ready at this point to just be off on her own and done with sort of the structure.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's interesting. I talk in the Café book about finding the X on the treasure map. That's when you're aligned with your purpose and you know what freedom feels like because every day you just feel in this incredible state of flow. And it's beautiful and it's awesome. It is very hard to go back to a state when you're not doing that once
Yes,
you've
it
tasted
is.
it.
Yes, it is. Cannot put that toothpaste back.
No, not at all. And you wouldn't want to, but it does become painful at times because you're faced with different decisions that require you to leave the toothpaste out.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. I want to go back to something you said about the algorithm, and I think I just want to highlight it because I agree with you, and I think it's super important. And that is that the universe or whatever you want to call it, the algorithm, um, sees our actions. It's not about our words. It's about
Mm,
our actions. The words help, especially if they're aligned with our actions.
yeah.
But we have to take, and so, when people have talked to me in the past about manifesting or anything like that, you can have your ideas, you can have your vision, you can have all that stuff. You have to take a step. You have to demonstrate. And then the universe can go, oh yeah, that's what they want. Okay, well, let's do more of that.
Yeah. Yeah. In my experience, I find that to be the case. So I love using a mantra. Excuse me, I discovered this a bunch of years ago and I found it to be a tremendous tool because it replaces unsupportive moments with supportive moments. And so I had this really bad habit. I'd be at a stoplight, I'd be in my truck, and I'd pull up to the stoplight, and my mind would drift back 20 years, 30 years to a random conversation or a random meeting that didn't go well. And I'd be replaying it in my mind. And I'd be trying to perfect my side of it as if somehow I was ever going to have the chance to re-experience that. I always laughingly say that the only way that would ever have happened is if I invented a time machine. And if I invent a time machine, I am not using it to go back to that moment. Like, I'm going to go see the Etruscans, right? I'm going to go. And so I realized at some point that this was a ridiculous waste of my energy and my time. And so I instead decided to come up with a mantra. And the mantra was 5 things that I wanted my life to be. And I would say them as if it already was true. And so I'd be sitting at the stoplight. And the crazy thing about this, Hope, and I share this because I want people to know that just like everybody else, like this is an ongoing work in progress for me. Like I struggle with certain things. This was one I really struggled with. The idea was great. The implementation was horrible. It took me 3 months because literally I'd get to the stoplight. I'd have these thoughts going back 20 or 30 years. I'd catch myself. I'd start doing my mantra in my head. And geez Louise, if not 30 seconds into the mantra, I'm back 20 years ago. I'm having that conversation. So it took me 3 months to retrain my brain that when I come up to a stoplight, when I have a moment of downtime in the grocery store, whatever those moments were that I used to do this old behavior, that this is my new behavior. The good news is after 3 months or so, it was on autopilot. So I literally would stop at the stoplight. I would default to my mantra.
Nice.
So I think that is very powerful. And I found it to be an amazing way to wake up your morning and right before you go to bed, because then the 8 hours before you go to sleep or the 8 hours while you're sleeping, it's filled with this mantra, which is beautiful. That said, I very much have discovered in my own life that it is about what you're doing too. because I believe that the presence, whether you call it God or the universe or whatever works for your personal belief system, it's a very benevolent presence, a very benevolent force. And so it's looking at the way you're spending your time and saying, well, this is astounding. Like, John is a creature of free will. He could do anything he wants right now. And look at what he's doing. He's sitting there in that chair that's uncomfortable. He's looking at that computer screen. That's the 9th hour he's been doing that today. This is amazing. His friend just asked him if he wanted to go to ancient ruins in Greece, and he's saying no because he's going to spend time in that chair. Like, he must love this. And because I am a benevolent presence and I love him, I will give him more of that. Like, when that came to me and I started to restructure my life with that awareness, it's amazing how fast things started to change.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I would take that one to the bank for everybody who's listening or watching. Just give that a try, because what's powerful about it is it means that if you change the inputs, you change the outputs.
Right.
And you control the inputs. So, hey, you just embolden yourself to have a different life if there's aspects of yours that you'd like to change.
Right. Wow. So well said. I love that. Oh, you must love sitting in that chair.
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. So what about you? You asked me the question, but do you have a favorite place besides, or is Africa your favorite?
I mean,
and are there
every
still
place
things
has-
on your list that you haven't
Oh,
been to yet?
I need 10 lifetimes. Yeah, as much as I love to travel, as much as I do travel, I literally think you'd need 10 lifetimes to really feel like you've seen it. And then it's always changing. You know, Thailand 20 years ago is not Thailand now. So, there's always reasons to go back and re-explore. But I would say that the most life-changing place for me was Africa, but that's probably tied to my quest to be an adventurer. But like, you go to places that is really off everybody's radar: Albania, Macedonia, Kosovo. These are countries that very few people travel to, but the Roman ruins in Albania are so spectacular. It was the reaches of the Roman Empire. The people are amazing. The landscape is incredible. It's super inexpensive to go. The food's spectacular. And so I like finding these little gems that I know nothing about. I know nothing about their history. And then when I go there, literally every second of every day is like beautiful input to my senses, because I know nothing when I start off there.
That is how I like to do it.
Yeah.
I like to know as little as possible so that it's just one unfolding, moment after another. And that's when I learn the history. And that's when when I bring a group, I do sometimes do a little more research.
Mm-hmm.
Because like when we went to Ireland, it was a Celtic theme. And so I needed to have I already had a good Celtic background, but I needed to have a better one, Ireland specific. So I did more research for that one. But I love that sense of discovery.
Yeah.
Right.
And the great thing about that is if you can allow yourself to embrace it. Now, don't get me wrong. If there's a place and you've only got a week and you want to hit the 6 highlights of that country, then you're probably going to do some research ahead of time and figure it out and make sure you hit the thing that you most want to do. But the great thing about a flexible schedule is you find yourself in places with people that you never, ever could have planned. And you talk about Ireland. I remember my buddy and I were doing a guy trip in Ireland. We're driving around and stopped in this one little place. And they're like, oh, did you know there's a music festival? I'm doing a bad Irish accent. Did you know there's a music festival going on in this town? And we hadn't even planned to go into this town. So we show up there and it's a 2-day music festival. And to see all these amazing little Irish pubs hosting each little independent band, it was like so random and so awesome. And the people were incredibly kind and gregarious and loud. And again, could not have planned that ever,
No.
And that only comes with having a little bit of flexibility built into your adventure, which I really like doing.
Definitely. Definitely. Beautiful. So you wrote a second book because you felt like it was time? You got the kind of tap on the shoulder that it was time?
Yeah, the second book that I wrote is a book called Life Safari. And it's not a lot of people know about that book compared to the other ones that I've written, but it is very often people come to me and they say, that's my favorite out of all of them. So it's kind of interesting in that regard. And it's a very emotional and a very powerful story. And that one flowed through me over the course of 21 days, 10 days for that book. The Café was 21 days. This one was 10 days. And I think part of the reason that it was 10 days is because I was in the house all by myself. And I literally, for 10 hours a day, was just having this story flow through me. And it was very, very profound. And I won't spoil the book because it is very emotional. But I knew the ending first for this one. And then in the process of writing up to the ending, it was about 2 a.m. and I was just at my desk. The only light in the entire house was my little desk lamp and my computer. And I was writing up to the ending. And when this very emotional experience happens in the story, it was so real for me that I was just bawling. I physically yelled out, "No!" And I was just crying and crying. Because at that moment I was there. I was in Africa. I was with this character, Mama Gombe, and it was just so real for me that I was right there with her in the midst of this experience. And so, yeah, that was the second book that I wrote.
That sounds very intriguing.
Yeah. Yeah. For travelers, they'll probably dig that one because it takes place in Africa. And so it's got the elements of adventure travel in it.
Oh, we love Africa. So, and then are there any other books that are, I know you've written others, so
I have,
they
yeah. Well,
all come through in the same way?
I would say that I think at the start, the algorithm realized I didn't have the maybe confidence, or I'm not sure what the right word is. Maybe the cafe story was fully formed already, and therefore it just needed someone to be the conduit for it. And these other ones were half formed, maybe. I don't know. And so I would say the other ones are more of a collaborative process than the first one was. But that said, I remember distinctly writing the sequel book to the cafe. And two things. One is, in the opening of the book, the main character is on a bicycle in Hawaii and is feeling the essence of the cafe, and then sees the cafe. And he talks in the narration of the story, he talks about feeling the sense of coming home. And Hope, when I read those pages, I have this sense of coming home like I can't even describe to. It's like so visceral to me. But I remember writing that one, and I was in the park, and I see the characters, I hear their words when I'm in the writing process. And there were so many times that the character of Casey would say something and I'd type it, and it was so profound that I knew a second ago it was not inside my head. Like, it definitely wasn't me,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think I'm a little more collaborative with it these days, but there's also a whole lot of connection to something that's way bigger than me.
And what is it that is coming through you? Do you know? Do you have some sense of guide teams or an author spirit, or what do you think?
I don't know. I've interacted and met many different people who have many different connections with the spirit world, and some of them they see essences of other people that have spirit guides. They have a whole team of spirit guides. Some people do. And I can't say that I see it in the way that they see it. But when I enter the cafe, I can talk to the characters who have this incredibly deep wisdom. I suppose in the same way that someone talks to a spirit guide or a soul circle or something like that for them. And so I guess maybe that's one of the uniquenesses of the human experience, that the way in which we connect to these sources is going to be different for each of us. And, for some people, maybe it's their grandparent who passed away and they're seeing and feeling the essence of that person and getting this wisdom. I do think that everybody who's ever existed, that we can tap into the energy that they either left behind and all the wisdom that they generated during that time, or even the energy that is still them.
Yeah.
And so I often say, like, if you wanted to be an adventurer, like, think of the most adventurous person you can think of, right? Maybe it was someone from the 1800s who was wandering across the wilds of some land. And even though they're gone, in a given moment when you're out on an adventure, if you're not sure what to do, ask yourself, like, oh, what would they do?
Yes, exactly.
And you're going to get this pop in your head of awareness that wasn't there a second earlier. And I think that's really them. I think that's their spirit, their energy.
Interesting. Whispering in your ear.
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, listen, let's see if there are some questions from the audience, because there could be a wide range of questions, and I hope people jump in. I mean,
Yeah. So let me give you a tiny caveat for everybody who's listening and watching regarding questions. So I live in Central Florida, and you live somewhere very different. Everybody on the call lives somewhere very different. And literally, there are a million things that each of us could be doing tonight. And for some reason, you're here and I'm here, and the universe has chosen to put us here at the exact same moment at the exact same time. And as much as I hope that this will not be the last time, the odds are this probably will be the only time that some of our paths will cross at the exact same moment. And so if the universe has gone through all that trouble and you actually have a question in your mind, now is the time to ask it.
Oh, well said. Come on, somebody. Karen, you have a question. But now, tell them about the white lions. But you gotta unmute yourself, honey.
Okay.
I was going to say, that's not asking, that's telling.
I know, but I figured.
Yeah, no, well, I have to preface my travel feelings. He's incredibly like my son, ways that's a little distracting, but good. So, yeah, I think the thing that I relate to with you saying is just trusting your feelings. That I went to Hope's house because a friend needed a ride and she was doing her show. And I said, I want to go on the next trip just because I was ready to travel. When she said, well, it's South Africa, I was like, you mean apartheid and AIDS? South Africa? That was all, but everything said yes. And I went, and it was the beginning of landing on the place where we went, where the white lions were, bursting into tears. And Linda Tucker, who was our host there, said, coming home, it's coming home. So I can just relate to so many of your stories. I don't actually have a question.
Can I ask you a question, Karen?
Yes.
I think one of the things that people often struggle with is, what does it feel like when your intuition speaks to you? And so you just said everything inside of you said go. And so do you hear a voice? Do you feel something physically? How do you know when that energy or that essence is talking to you and that it's worth listening? What does it feel like for you?
It's not in my ear. It's not in my dowsing. It's just trust. It's just unconditional trust that I just trust, what's a yes and what's a no. And just so, yeah, it's interesting. But having said that, it is something that I'm trying to learn more of, what that means, that I have in me. It's listening. I've always listened to the big guy. And although not even that specific, just listen. Just listen and trust. And it just is growing and growing.
And do you hear it different than just a thought? Like, how do you tell the difference between your own thought and your intuition? Or God, or whatever is your guiding presence?
Yeah, it's just that I don't question it.
Okay.
It's just that when I get a feeling like, well, yeah, I'm going on this trip, it's just a yes to go. And then I trust it. I mean, even in the negative way, I recently had, I woke up, I had a really bad headache and blurry eye, and I was getting ready to go babysit. And I got in my car and I drove to town to the hospital, and I was having a little stroke. And then when I talked to somebody who said, how'd you know to go? Well, I just trust. It wasn't like a big think. It was just the next thing to do is go without a whole lot of hoopla about it.
So when you know, and that's the difference.
Yeah.
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 How about for you, Hope? Do you have a sense when you experience your intuition? What is it like for you? Do you hear things? Do you feel things? Do you get physical reactions?
I get a whole, it depends. I would say yes to all of those things. I can sit down and channel my guides. I can get after it with dowsing. I can get after it meditation. Sometimes it comes in like a freight train and I can't ignore it. It could be anything. But that's, that's something that that's why I teach dowsing, because it jumpstarts the process of listening and getting some kind of feedback, so that we're not just, I remember when I first figured out that there were voices way in the back of my head, in a way, that have been talking to me my whole life. And I'd sort of push them to the back. And then it turns out, oh, those are the voices.
Those are the ones to listen to. Yeah.
And I pulled them right to the front, and I said, okay, let's have a better relationship here. Yeah, it was kind of a surprise. Wait a minute, you've been here the whole time.
Well, and I ask because I think everybody's experience is going to be slightly different.
Sure.
Subtly different. And I don't find that it's something that you're taught when you're younger, unless you happen to be brought up in a household where it's really understood and appreciated. And so then it becomes a bit of like, okay, you guys, you're kind of on your own as far as this goes in terms of figuring it out. And it's such an incredible resource that we all have is at our disposal. And so one of the reasons I think people go through life with so much fear and uncertainty is because they don't realize that you're not alone, that you can tap into these energies and use those as like collaborative conduits to make your decisions along the way.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Oh, it's so much better than just feeling all alone all the time.
Yeah.
Let's see. Anybody else have a question
Or a comment.
or a comment of our world traveler here? Have you been to every continent?
I've not been to Antarctica yet. Yeah. Strangely enough, though, I do have a funny Antarctica story. It actually goes and sits well with this conversation, or syncs well with this conversation. And so I don't remember exactly when, but at some point I realized that the Café had sold on 6 of the 7 continents. This is quite a long time ago. And I thought, oh, that'd be a really cool life experience to know that I had somehow inspired people on all 7 of the 7 continents. And of course, the one I had left was Antarctica. I didn't know anything about Antarctica. And again, this is a bunch of years ago, but I get online, I start looking, and I find out that there's typically about 2,000 people on the continent of Antarctica. And, that's 2,000 out of whatever 8 billion on the planet. And that there's half the year or more where it's actually so ice locked that nothing gets in, nothing gets out for the most part, except for the people who are still sitting there. And so I, again, didn't have any connections to it. I didn't know anything about it, but I was like, oh, that would be really cool. And so I was thinking, like, how am I going to pull this off, And so I do a Google search, and I can't remember exactly what my search term was, but it was, I think I might have typed in who's in Antarctica. And so up pops his name, and it's this guy named Ask Jack. And he was a meteorologist who worked for newspaper USA Today. And he had spent a lot of time in Antarctica. And so he had this column that he would run called Ask Jack. And I was like, oh, could that be a better sign from the universe? So I sent this email and I was like, hey, Jack, I'm asking. It was my goal, right? And 6 of the 7 continents, Antarctica's left. And again, I don't know this guy. He doesn't know me from Adam, but the very next day he sends me back this super long email. And he said, oh, here's all the companies that do work in Antarctica. He got me their URLs, their websites, all the rest of this. And so super nice dude. Like I didn't know him at all. But just simply because I asked and it was something that mattered to me. And so I click on the very first one, and it's this company. They're in Colorado. I call them up and I get this person on the phone. I said, hey, my name's John Strelecky, and I've sold books on 6 of the 7 continents. And I'm just like rolling, like I'm going through it. And I tell the whole story, and this person goes, you just hear this pause on the other end of the phone. And this very nice lady, she goes, actually, I'm just the receptionist here. Hey, hang on. So she's like, hang on a second, I'll connect you with someone who might be able to help you. And so sure enough, she hooks me up with this other person and tell the whole story again. And she says the words that you often hear in these situations. She says, I can help you. And she said, how do you want to sell it? And honestly, Hope, I hadn't even thought that far ahead. Like it's just, this whole thing was just a train in motion. And so at the time, it was very hard to sell something to Antarctica. So I actually had my pathetic little website, but they wouldn't let you sell something to Antarctica. And so I had to find this feature on Amazon where you could list something for auction, and Amazon would actually take a bid from Antarctica back then.
What's that?
in the description, I put, please do not bid unless you live in Antarctica. And so I set up this whole auction and we sold 5 copies of the Café book to Antarctica. And the crazy thing was that at the time I was trying to do it, which I didn't realize, that it was winter time. So there's 2,000 people there during the summertime. There's only 200 there during the wintertime. And so just statistically, the odds of actually pulling that off were miraculous, like 200 people out of 8 billion on the planet, right? And I'm somehow going to inspire one of them to purchase a copy of a book from a guy they've never heard of, book they've never read before. And I think my total time invested was like 42 minutes. Like that's all it took, was 42 minutes of my life to make that happen. And that's so eye-opening to me, because when you are in alignment with your intuition, when you're moving in the direction that you actually are passionate about, people want to help and they will come out of the woodwork to help you. And so I often share that aspect of following your dreams, whether it's writing a book or doing something else, that don't let your hesitations or your fears hold you back, because people are actually probably more willing to help than you realize. And that was certainly my experience in that situation. So yeah, someday I will get to Antarctica, and sure enough, I hope to see a copy of the Café book sitting on a shelf somewhere from 18 years ago or so.
I mean, the title of the book kind of goes along with Antarctica. They're hand in hand, so I could see why it would be attractive.
There you go.
This is great. Jen says, thank you, Hope and John. Feeling heartfelt, inspired, beautiful discussion. Thank you, Jen. Anybody else have a comment or a question for John? Your paths may not cross again.
Exactly. This might be the only time ever.
Well, the only other thing, and again, it's not a question, but it's a comment about Hope takes these trips, and I've been on 5 or 6 of them, but following the way you talk about how we make decisions, was a friend just needed a ride to get to her house to see the slideshow that she was presenting. But I have this interest in feng shui and clutter clearing and this kind of thing. And the way I decided that I was going on that next trip, even though it was South Africa, which is only apartheid and AIDS, crazy, was that Hope's house was the first house I was ever in that I wasn't moving things around in my mind. And that's how I decided. But the ridiculous part was that when I mentioned it to my husband, he looked at, he would never see eyes rolled like his eyes. Well, what? Because
it's because her furniture was all in the right place. You're going to South Africa.
I know. I'm sorry I said it. But again, it was that follow whatever that thing is. That I just get it.
Yeah, and interesting that you talk about what your perception of Africa was before you got there. And often that's the barrier that holds us from that keeps us from taking steps in the direction that we genuinely feel called to go. And I will say that having traveled as much as I've traveled, one of the ahas for life that I got was about challenging every belief that I have.
Yes.
And asking where that belief actually comes from. And it's amazing. So many times when you do that, what you realize is that the belief was formed when you were young. And it was a random one-off comment by somebody that you accepted to be truth. And then you literally built an entire pathway off of that perception of truth. But you yourself, you don't know if it's true. And crazy enough, you can actually hold realities in your head that prove it's not true. But until you bring them forward in your consciousness, you will let this old code dictate your behavior. And so just the simple act of when you have a thought and you're like, oh, I think that's true, or I know that's true, just allowing yourself to ask with genuine curiosity, why do I believe that?
Yeah.
Amazing how that can open up the possibilities in life.
That is so true. And it's not just for travel. It's for every single belief. We're built on these judgments and predispositions and opinions and all of that. That's not worth very much. We need to have direct experience and let that be the thing that we form our opinions or our judgments on. Not judgments, but base our reality on. And
very often people did it with good intentions. That was their version of reality. And maybe in part it was based on their actual experiences, maybe not. And so I don't blame the people for imparting that perception on us. It's just on us as fully functioning conscious
Yeah.
humans to give ourselves the flexibility and freedom to say, do I still believe that?
Yeah. Yeah. Examine all of that. So true.
It'll free you too. That's the beautiful thing about it, is that once you start once you start digging into these, and I had plenty of them, you start to realize like, oh, I'm holding an awful lot of emotional and mental real estate attached to something that actually is not even true.
So true. Beautifully said. Well, anybody else? And if not, we will sign off. Excuse me. Ooh, getting over the flu still.
Thank you so much for doing this, even if you were a little under the weather or recovering. Thank you, everybody who joined.
Really, it was just fascinating, John. And I have you ever just wondering, are any of the books that you've written, because I'm not familiar with all of them, did you ever write a kind of travel log?
No, I did actually. I just never published it. Yeah. I had written a book talking about my adventures and my experiences. And then, yeah, it's sitting on a hard drive, but has never.
Well, I'd be interested in that for sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's something that I'm happy that I have it because it's crazy in life how you think you're going to remember things.
Yeah.
And you'll think, oh, yes, I'll never forget this. And then 7 years go by or so, and you remember the highlight moments or a specific instance. But sometimes the greatest experiences are just the tiny fractional moments.
Yes.
And what's interesting is a picture can bring it all back, or a sentence in a journal can bring it all back.
Yes.
But you kind of need that entry point to the whole story. And so I'm glad that I wrote it down back when I did, because even if nobody ever sees it except for me, it's my entry point back into all those memories.
Where are you going next?
That's a good question. I'm heading down to South America early 2026. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to do Uruguay, Paraguay, or Chile. And so it almost doesn't matter because I haven't spent a lot of time in those countries. And so each of them will be something unique and special. But I have not decided yet.
Okay. Well, Chile I've been to, not the other two.
Okay.
But it's, yeah, beautiful, wonderful, full of mystery, a lot of ET activity. Speaking
Nice.
of, really adventuring. But I hope you have a wonderful trip, no matter
Thank
where you
you.
go. And let's tell people how they can follow you.
Yeah, so I'm on all social media platforms, just my name, John Strelecky. And you can, if you're interested and energetically feel connected to the cafe world and want to experience that, the easiest way is to just get a copy through Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And if you want to check out anything else of mine, the best spot is my website, which is just my name. So www.johnstrelecky.com.
And now the copy stays exactly where it's supposed to stay, on your website, right?
Exactly. That website will actually look professional, unlike my first one.
Okay. Well, thank you, John. And this is really fun. And we'll see where you show up next.
Sounds great. Well, I'll look for you across a internet cafe somewhere or a random cafe somewhere in the world. And it wouldn't surprise me if our paths do cross that way.
Oh, I would love that. I would love that. So if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe and share it. Share it with lots of people. Yes, somebody asked about if there will be a recording. Of course there will be. It's going to be on YouTube as soon as we get it rendered and ready to go. And you'll be able to watch it and share it to your heart's content. All right? Thank you,
Thanks
friends.
so much. Take care.
Thank you, John. Night-night, everybody.